You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding, combating stigma since 2021. I wanted there to be a podcast about hoarding disorder from somebody who hoarded rather than a professional. That didn't exist, so I created it. And that's this podcast that you're listening to now. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. This episode is sponsored by Cambridge University Press, publisher of Dr. Lynn Drummond's new book, Everything You Need to Know About Hoarding. Struggling with hoarding disorder, feeling ashamed or guilty about your belongings and afraid to let them go is more common than you might think, affecting up to 6% of the general population. But despite its prevalence, seeking help can be challenging. This new book provides a clear description of hoarding, exploring it as a symptom of other issues as well as a condition in its own right. You'll learn about different treatment options and find step-by-step guidance and tools for recovery in the self-help section. Personal narratives and case studies make this guide accessible and relatable for those affected by hoarding as well as their loved ones and health professionals. Don't let hoarding disorder control your life. Take the first step towards recovery today with this invaluable resource. Everything you need to know about hoarding is out in the US now. Buy your copy at cambridge.org/everythinghoarding. But everything and hoarding have capital letters. Get 20% off with discount code HOARDING20. Hey, how are you? I am pretty cheerful. Today I am talking about decision making and hoarding. It's a topic that comes up again and again and again when I talk to listeners as something a lot of us find really difficult. So I'm going to talk us through that. But first, I have 2 little points of housekeeping.
Let's start with some housekeeping.
Number 1. The next De-Hoarding Accountability Zoom sessions are on the 1st of June and the 20th of June. It would be so lovely to see you there. You come along, you can have your camera on or off depending on which you're more comfortable with. You pick an area you want to start working on. That might be a physical area, it might be something practical generally. And we all get on with our tasks in our own homes while chatting, and I have a lovely chat with you. It's a very supportive environment and lovely people come. So it would be great to see you on the 1st or the 20th of June. If you would like to come along, you can grab a ticket at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/ticket. And number 2 housekeeping is some thank yous. I had a few weeks off a month or 2 ago because I was not doing well. And I want to thank the people who got in touch to check in with me or to send supportive messages. I want to thank the people at the De-Hoarding Accountability Zooms who have been lovely and supportive. And in particular, I want to thank 2 good friends of the podcast. One is Dr. Jan Eppingstall, who you no doubt know. The other is Harriet Impey from episode 172. Both of those have been part of a small group of people keeping me more or less upright over the last few months. Both have been incredibly lovely and supportive. And if my real life friend who knows about the podcast is listening, you are also in that group. It's been a game changer to have people being so loving and supportive, and I have really, really appreciated it. So, decision making. This is something that comes up a lot in the De-Hoarding Accountability Zooms. It comes up a lot on social media and in emails I get from listeners. If making choices about your belongings or about acquiring feels really overwhelming or impossible or like something you put off, this could just be the episode for you. Decision making can be especially difficult for people who hoard, and it can have really, really negative consequences when we can't do it. So I'm going to talk through, first of all, why it's difficult. Secondly, what can go wrong if we get stuck in an inability to make decisions. And finally, some strategies and techniques that might help us to make better decisions or make decisions at all. So, one of the reasons that decision making can be difficult for people who hoard is overload, cognitive overload. There are just too many things to process. There's so much volume that every decision feels pressurized and kind of monumental. We can get stuck in avoidance. We can avoid making decisions as a way to cope with the anxiety about making them. And so we defer decision making or we ignore the need to make decisions. And so stuff continues to accumulate or stuff does not leave our homes because we're avoiding making a decision about everything. We can get caught in a kind of analysis paralysis. We can see too many potential outcomes or too many potential options, and we get stuck in our heads and kind of freeze. And that can especially happen if we find it difficult to prioritize. It can especially also happen if we just overthink everything, and that is exhausting. So we can get stuck in that analysis paralysis because we are so tired from overthinking every single decision we make. If we have trouble processing information, that can relate as well to that prioritizing piece. If we struggle to work out which bits are the most urgent, which are the most important, if we struggle to filter what information we might need to keep and what information we don't need to keep, if we get stuck in like a loop, a decision loop, without being able to resolve it, that is exhausting and it also keeps us stuck. There are also more emotional barriers to making decisions easily. One is around perfectionism and being afraid of making the wrong decision. When we have perfectionist tendencies, we can feel like we have to make every decision perfectly and get everything exactly right. And if we add that to catastrophizing about how awful it would feel if we made the wrong decision, that's an immense amount of pressure to put on ourselves. And so we are so afraid of getting it wrong that we don't make any decisions or make any choices at all. And that exhaustion I mentioned, we just get decision fatigue sometimes. We feel if we are actively dehoarding, we can feel like we're just making so many decisions because we have so many choices to make about so many items. But the more we don't make decisions, the more stuff accumulates or the less stuff leaves the house. And so it compounds the problem and we get stuck in a real vicious cycle. We might also have very all or nothing thinking, which can relate to perfectionism. We're either going to get this right or wrong, and there's no in between. We can struggle to see that sometimes good enough is good enough. If we are very sentimental or emotionally attached to things, that can be especially difficult for a lot of people when trying to make decisions about items, especially with fear of regret, or if we associate an item with a person or a place or a time in our life. And if on top of that, we also find it hard to tell what is a genuinely sentimental item and what is something that actually isn't that sentimental. Maybe it was a gift from somebody, but we're not bothered about it, or even especially bothered about them sometimes. But something in our head goes, no, gift, therefore sentimental, therefore keep. on top of that, see, there's lots of on top ofs. It's no wonder we struggle with decision making at times. If we add worry about the future, that is a really paralyzing fear sometimes. What if I need this? What if I get rid of this and then I need it? What if I get rid of this and then regret it? And we're kind of stuck drowning in stuff because of hypothetical situations in the future that may or may not happen. But that sense of the future being unknown and our future needs being unknown can fill us with so much fear that it can prevent us from making decisions today if we're so scared that we might need it, or if we're so scared that we might regret it. That feels worse than not being able to move around our own homes easily. And finally, another reason we might struggle with decision making is if we are struggling with our executive functioning. Now, I've talked about executive functioning in a number of previous episodes that I will link to in the show notes at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. But if you find planning or organising or prioritising or starting tasks really, really difficult, if you struggle with your working memory, that can all have a real impact on how easy or difficult you find it to make decisions. So you can see that this is a really complex mixture of things, and it might be that you've listened to that list and think all of those apply to me, or it might be just one or two. But you can really see how things can escalate if we find decision making really difficult. And so we don't make decisions, and so our homes become fuller. And so any sense of overwhelm or decision fatigue just magnifies. And so we get even more stuck. And so more stuff accumulates. And so we get even more stuck than that. And that vicious cycle is one of the consequences of avoiding making decisions. The inability to discard or the inability to say no to acquiring something leads to more clutter. And we know that clutter causes problems, whether that's safety issues, whether it's not being able to use your home in the way you would like to, whether it's being isolated socially because you feel like you can't invite people over. Maybe not inviting people over puts strain or difficulty in your relationships. Another consequence of things continuing to accumulate is it's stressful and depressing and can make you feel really overwhelmed and guilty and ashamed. There's often financial stress associated with hoarding and accumulation as well, whether that's because you're buying things, whether it's because you're buying duplicates because you can't find the thing that you know you have, whether it's that things get broken in your home, whether it's that because you're struggling to stay organised, you're not paying bills and you get financial penalties. There can be additional financial strain if you are a person who hoards, because these unmade decisions add up. Every decision we avoid making, first of all, creates more decisions we have to make in the future, and also kind of makes it harder to make those decisions. On top of that, the more we avoid making decisions, the more convinced we can become that we can't make decisions. If we constantly say, no, I can't do that, and don't do it, we believe that. And then if we get to a point where we haven't made a serious decision in ages, that feels like proof that we can't do it. We lose our confidence in our decision-making abilities, which then creates kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's burdensome to be carrying a lot of unmade decisions. There's a lot of low-level or high-level stress because we know we haven't made these decisions. We feel like avoiding making decisions will reduce our anxiety because we don't have to go through the anxiety of making that choice. But actually, it maintains or creates a sense of anxiety when we never make decisions or when we avoid it as far as possible. We don't trust ourselves to make decisions. We second guess ourselves constantly. We're constantly doubting ourselves. And that does your self-esteem no good. It does your surroundings no good. It makes it really hard to create change in our homes. And so any tips and techniques and approaches that can help us to improve our decision-making skills can make a real measurable difference to our lives if we have the guts to give it a go, if we try things out. So I'm going to talk through a range of strategies and techniques that might help. Listen to them, see if any resonate, see if you really resist the idea of some of them. I sometimes find that the ideas I resist the most are the ones I need to do the most. Not necessarily, but sometimes. But have a listen to some of these ideas and techniques and see if any sound like something you might be willing to give a try. So the first one I want to talk about is working out what our resistance is to making a decision. Sometimes we just have a very clear nope when it comes to a decision. We know we need to make it. We try and make it. Something in our brain says nope and shuts down. And it can be incredibly useful to question that nope a bit. What is actually going on? What are we actually afraid of? Or what are we overwhelmed by? Or what feels impossible about that decision? Sometimes if we identify, okay, I'm scared that if I make the wrong decision here, I'll regret it for this reason. Sometimes we might identify, oh, there are just too many decisions and I don't know how I will ever make 1,000 decisions. And then we can say, okay, if that's the problem, maybe I need to focus on just this one. Or maybe the block, maybe the nope in our head is I can't make this decision because that involves thinking about that relationship that I'd rather not think about. If we can identify what that block is, what the nope is, sometimes the ability to make that decision becomes instantly easier. Sometimes it doesn't, but even if it doesn't, having that extra awareness of where your mental block is can help you moving forward in the bigger picture, even if it doesn't help with that immediate decision. The second strategy I want to talk about is treating a decision as an experiment, or treating making a decision as an experiment. This is something I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy and helps me still, even though it's years since I had it. If I'm overwhelmed by the idea of a task, if I don't think I can do something, if I'm scared I'll do it wrong, if instead of treating it as a test or as a task I can either pass or fail, if instead I think of it as an experiment, it takes a lot of mental pressure off me. And it's not a pass or fail situation. It's I will learn something from this either way situation. And it removes a lot of that pressure in a way that often helps me to make decisions more easily or make decisions at all. The third technique I want to talk about is micro decisions, small, tiny decisions. Don't start with your most emotionally charged items. Don't start with your difficult items or your most expensive items to make decisions about. Start with low stakes things. What's low stakes for me may not be low stakes for you. But if you know the kind of thing you stress least about, maybe it's empty Pepsi Max bottles. Maybe it's paperwork that's 20 years old. If you know that there's a category or an area of your home that you do not find as emotionally charged or as cognitively complex as others, start there. There's no need to start with the hardest bits. In fact, it's unwise in most cases to start with high stakes decisions, because this helps you to build your confidence. It helps you to start to trust that you can make decisions and that you can even make good decisions. And by practicing with those tiny micro decisions, you're building your decision-making muscle. I talk a lot about building our de-hoarding muscle, and this is a very similar thing. For me, old nostalgic letters and photos would be the worst place to start. For me, expired food would be a great place to start because I'm very clear that I don't eat that. For you, it might be the other way round. If you can start to understand a bit about your own patterns and what you find most difficult and what you find maybe on the easier end of the spectrum, start with the easier end of the spectrum so that you can build up confidence, build up that muscle as you practice with your low stakes decisions so that by the time it gets to the harder stuff, you've been practicing. Do you have a business that would benefit from advertising to thousands of dedicated listeners with an interest in mental health and home organisation? Therapy services, professional organisers, self-help stuff or organising services could all be helpful for my listeners. So get in touch if you'd like to chat about the options or go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/sponsor. The fourth thing that can really help with decision making is having some kind of support system, whether that's just somebody you say, what would you do about this particular item to? Or whether it's something more formal like a professional organizer or a therapist who's helping you make decisions, or a friend or family member who's helping you more practically with your de-hoarding. The reason checking in with somebody else about your decisions can be useful, well, there's a number of reasons. One is it's a kind of sense check. You might be thinking, I think this is the right decision, but I don't quite trust myself. I'm going to get someone else's perspective to see whether I was roughly on the right track according to what they think. Obviously, you may be right and they may be wrong, but it gives you the chance to bat the ideas out a bit. Another reason it can be helpful is just accountability. If you talk a decision through with somebody, you might be more likely to follow through, not least because they may be more likely to check with you as to how you got on with it after you've talked about it with them. The fifth technique that can be helpful with decision making is to work out your own values and priorities and try and match up the decisions you make with those values and priorities. If your priority or your goal is to have friends over ultimately, or have your family over ultimately, then what you can do is check if you're finding a decision difficult. Check, does keeping or getting rid of this, or does acquiring this or not acquiring this, help me to get towards my priority or my goal or my values? Or does it move me away from my priority or my values or my goal? Dr. Jan Eppingstall and I talked about this in our episode on towards and away moves. And it's a really good way to help you make tough decisions like, oh, I really want to keep all of these. But then if I check in with one of my values is nurturing and supporting people, and I want to do that through cooking for them at my home. And if that's important to me, how does that stack up compared to my desire to keep 37 teacups? It can be a useful way to check that rather than getting caught up in the moment, you're actually thinking through what matters to you. And that might be that you only want to keep things that serve a purpose in your life. It might be that you want to keep beautiful things. It might be that you want to focus on keeping things you use rather than things you might hypothetically one day use. But if you work out what your own priorities and values are, that can help to guide the decisions you have to make. A sixth technique for helping to make decisions more easily is to consider setting a time limit for a choice. You might say, everything I pick up from this particular pile, I will make a decision about within And the time will vary. Like I was about to say 60 seconds, and that might feel like an age to some people and like ridiculously quick to other people. So choose your own time frame, and it may be that over time with practice, that box of time you allocate yourself gets smaller as you gain in confidence. But actually, if we place a limit on the amount of time we're going to spend considering a particular choice, that might feel like it's constraining and limiting, but actually it can free us up to make decisions more easily. Just that little bit of extra pressure can help to focus our minds and prevent that kind of overthinking that we can get really, really stuck in. The 7th technique is to allow yourself to make decisions that are good enough, to allow yourself to drop the need to make every decision perfectly, and instead allow yourself at least some of the time to be adequate. Think about that for a second. How does that feel, the idea of some of the time being adequate? Because we don't expect perfection 100% of the time from 100% of the people around us. That's not how life works. We know that people make errors. We know that people get tired and make poor decisions. We know all of that and we forgive it. We accept it. So if we're struggling to allow ourselves to sometimes make decisions that are just good enough, maybe we need to assess whether we have a degree of double standards going on and we're treating ourselves more harshly than what we expect of other people. And that's not fair on us. And it's really limiting and it prevents us from doing a lot of things. It just makes everything that bit harder if we can't do it for fear of not doing it perfectly. So sit with the idea of being good enough and really try and talk yourself into why being good enough is good enough. The 8th thing that can really help with decision making is reducing the number of options you have. And again, this might sound like a constraint, but actually it makes it so much easier to make a decision if your only options are keep or throw, or if your only options are keep, throw, donate, than it is if your options are keep in a box that I will decide about later, or keep forever, or throw it in the bin, or put it in the recycling, or give it to the Cancer Research Charity Shop, or give it to the British Heart Foundation Charity Shop, or give it to the Oxfam Charity Shop. That makes it a lot harder. You might feel like you're giving yourself more choice, but actually, if you have fewer things to decide, and especially if you can set up some criteria that are almost predetermined, that can reduce the amount of mental stress it takes to make a decision. The 9th idea that can help with decision making is trying your best to do a reality check. If you are tempted with, I might need it, don't accept that as your final decision. Ask yourself, okay, I might need it, but realistically, will I? Will I soon need it? Will I be able to find it if I do need it? Do I have 25 others of these that I could use instead? Do I have something entirely different I could use instead if I did find a need for it? It might involve asking yourself, have I used it in the last 6 months? If you can test your automatic reaction with a bit of reality probing, that can help us to be a bit more objective in the decisions we're making. Recognizing when we're avoiding making a decision can be a really important skill as well. Sometimes we don't know we're doing it. We just nope out, or we do something else, or we procrastinate, or any of those things. So actually, the 10th technique can be to just notice more. Clock it. when you're avoiding making a decision. You don't immediately necessarily have to do anything differently. Just try and be more mindful and be more aware so that you at least recognize how much of a problem is this for me? Is this a significant barrier in my life? And if so, what might I do about it? The 11th technique I want to mention is about building our tolerance to uncertainty and building our tolerance to discomfort. It's, of course, very understandable that we don't want to experience discomfort. We don't want to experience uncertainty. However, life is full of uncertainty and life is full of discomfort. And as I talked about earlier, not making decisions does not lead us to a life of perfect comfort and perfect certainty. It creates more and more and more problems for us. So if we can learn gradually, gently, to sit with that discomfort, to allow ourselves to experience it, even in tiny bits, even just for a moment, that can prove to us that actually we can handle it. Or that, sure, it's unpleasant, but I've dealt with worse. Or any number of things that the thing we fear is not always as bad as we think it's going to be. Building some consistency into our decision making can help as well. So my 12th technique is to think about how you can build some small decision making experiences into your daily life. Maybe you set a goal that every day you're going to make one decision that you've been putting off about your belongings. Maybe your goal is every day you're going to spot a time that you're avoiding making a decision, and you're going to prod that a bit and see whether actually maybe you're brave enough to make it anyway. If making decisions is something we put off and put off and put off, we lose our confidence in our ability to do it. We get out of practice. We think we can't do it. If we can build some consistency of decision making into our daily life, ideally about our stuff, about our belongings, but about other things as well, that confidence can grow that we can actually do it. So that's 12 different techniques there, all about helping us to make decisions more easily or make decisions at all, helping us to trust ourselves to make decisions, which we might not currently do. We might not trust ourselves to make the right decision, and so we just don't make decisions. But as I've talked about, that creates many problems of its own, and it's not helping us to get out of this situation we're in. So remember that decision-making skills are not something we either have or we don't have. They are things we can learn, and they are things we can practice and get better and quicker at, and that will feel easier the more we do it. So consistency, starting small, and allowing ourselves to make imperfect decisions, to make good enough decisions, are all ways that we can gradually build that trust in ourselves. When we notice we're avoiding a decision, we might want to just mentally make a note of it, or we might want to use it as an opportunity to gently challenge ourselves and say, is it really as hard as I'm making it out to be? Am I really incapable of making this decision? Setting timers, practicing, because every time we make a decision, we build a bit of confidence for the next one. Every time we make a decision and it turns out fine, which it mostly will, it proves to us that we can do it. We've got more ability than we think we have to make decisions and to make good decisions.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
So shout out this week to a podcast called Reasons to be Cheerful with Ed Miliband. Have a listen to Ed's guest.
There's so many fascinating aspects. You say that and forgive me if I get this wrong, positive experience has longer lasting effects, positive effects than the purchase of goods. Am I right in describing it that way?
Yeah, so this is a well-known phenomena that has been found that experiences give you more joy than material goods. So, a holiday, you go on a concert, you go to a nice dinner versus buying something, a new outfit, or even big things like a car or something like that. And there's a few interesting aspects here. First, that if you look at the data, it seems to suggest that the difference is not necessarily at the time of the experience or at the time of purchasing the item. At that point, on average, purchases can actually give you as much joy as an experience. It is more that it lasts, the positive impact on your well-being lasts longer when in its experience. And it's quite counterintuitive because you think, well, an experience is a short amount of time. Right? I go on holiday for a few days. I go to a concert. It's a few hours versus, my new TV is there for a long time, or my outfit can be, 20 years. But first of all, experiences last in your mind for quite a long time, right? So, you can come up with wonderful experiences that you've had 20 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Easily, and they make you happy when you think about them. Now, purchases are in front of you. And so they're also in front of you for a long time. Here's the difference. Because they're in front of you for a long time, you habituate to them, right?
Oh, I see.
So, I actually just bought a car and it makes me super happy. So I'm having a hard time saying this because it's only being a week and I cannot imagine that I will habituate. But that's what the data suggests, right? But take anything else, you purchase it and you're kind of really happy about it. I don't know, a new phone, right? Whatever, a new phone.
Jeff is like this with the new phone. I was thinking about Jeff and the new phone because you always think it's going to make you happier. An upgraded iPhone, and then you get used to it, don't you, Jeff?
Very, very quickly.
So I will link to Reasons to be Cheerful with Ed Miliband in the show notes at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. I think that's a really useful way to think of things. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.